This video by Mid-Missouri History Associates is the final in a series of 6 that investigates the question of the role of contraband slaves during the Second Battle of Boonville on 13 September 1861. In previous installments, it has been documented that 2 days prior to the engagement, 6 prominent citizens of Boonville were arrested and taken to what were known as the fairgrounds. Located on the river bluffs just east of Boonville, the fairgrounds were once the site of muster for the Missouri State Guard in the earliest days of the war, and now were crowned with earthworks, thrown up by order of General Nathaniel Lyon in late June. Approximately 4 feet in height and 10 feet in width, these fortifications were occupied by a small force of men, mostly of German descent, numbering around 140. A letter written by an unnamed citizen the day of the battle mentioned the arrest, but went into little detail about the reasoning for it. Several other segments of this series also go into detail about the appearance of one or more groups of contraband slaves appearing at the fortifications before Major Epstein with word of impending attack, and possibly even one contraband slave who might have appeared the day of the battle immediately preceding the event. Heretofore, only accounts of Northern soldiers and war correspondents have been the focus of the investigation. They are all of a secondary nature, and some are of questionable connection to the battle, while others seem to carry relevant connected material. Colonel John Kelton, commanding the 9th Missouri Infantry, gave undeniable proof of the occurrence with his 6th October order sending these contraband individuals to work at the fortifications in Jefferson City. The investigation now turns to civilian correspondence regarding the issue. For the first time, we will examine an account that is both connected but also primary in its nature, as we look into the memoirs of one of the civilians taken prisoner on the 11th of September 1861. This individual was the Reverend Henry Martyn Paynter. Reverend Paynter published a work in 1863 during his Massachusetts exile, which was later skillfully used by his wife to craft a memoir of the man after his death in the 1890s. His 1863 work detailed the numerous events that occurred in Missouri, which turned it upside down in 1861 and 1862. His original work blends in rather seamlessly with the publication of the work by his wife, as she makes direct word-for-word use of his material, combining it with her own recollection. Martyn's original words are written within 2 years of the events, while those of his wife do take place after the passage of 30 years of time. Despite this fact, the narrative gives us valuable insight as to the events of that day. Reverend Paynter described his written words as being written in the excitement of personal suffering. As such, he informed his reader that his works were not perfect. He described his view as sympathetic to the Southern cause and supportive of their grievances, though he also stated that he opposed secession and was supportive of the office of the president, frequently reminding his parish about the biblical admonition of following the government which protected you. Even if he did not wholeheartedly approve of the man who occupied the presidency, that office was deserving of the respect and loyalty of him as a citizen. This was the message that even his congregation received during his sermons. While his opposition to secession did not place him in the conditional unionist camp, it certainly did not make him an unconditional unionist. It was this, combined with his position as a clergyman, that caused Reverend Paynter to fall under a cloud of suspicion and made him a target of the preemptive actions taken by Joseph Epstein and his home guards. The arrest of Reverend Paynter occurred sometime on the morning of the 11th of September. The family was at their residence, which according to various writings of Alice Paynter appeared to have been outside town, though the 1860 census enumerated their residency as the city of Boonville. Living with his wife Alice and their 5-year-old daughter Anna, Reverend Paynter lived in close proximity to another clergyman, 2 blacksmiths, and the statesman George Graham Vest, as well as a boarding house run by R.A. Howard. The family was tending to routine morning activities on their property. Alice and Anna were in the pantry, and Reverend Paynter was in his garden, training a grapevine with his gardener. The hired freedwoman, Dinah, appeared and informed Alice that there were soldiers all around the house. Reverend Paynter's wife stepped to the entryway of their home, whereupon the soldiers inquired as to the whereabouts of the Reverend Paynter. Mrs. Paynter directed the soldier to the clergyman, who approached him and engaged him in discussion. She made no mention of duress, but did relay the outcome of the conversation. The Reverend was to be escorted to the fairgrounds, where he was to meet with Major Epstein. There did not appear to be a sense of urgency. Reverend Paynter was allowed to go upstairs and wash up from his garden work. Alice, however, indicated that she talked at the soldiers in an excited manner, uncertain about what this sudden detainment might mean for her husband. His washing completed, Reverend Paynter reappeared, whereupon the soldiers formed a file and placed him at the front. Alice rushed down to his side, taking his arm to go with him. This brought the first objections from the soldiers, but Reverend Paynter calmed the situation by telling Alice to not abuse the home guard, as they were only doing what they were commanded to do. Whatever else he said, the home guards relented, and the couple was marched through the streets of Boonville, with friends and neighbors looking silently on. Their arrival at the fairgrounds showed them that they were not the only family swept up in this situation. Other prominent citizens were also detained and brought before Major Epstein. The Boonville resident and home guard commander stepped forward to address the citizens brought before him. Reverend Paynter recalled that he informed us that he had no charge against any of us. Rather, he simply arrested us as prominent citizens for hostages. A rebel attack was expected in the coming days. If the attack was made, they would be put up on the breastworks for defense. Realizing what was happening, Reverend Paynter sent his wife home, asking that she be escorted by a guard. Alice, fearing for her own safety and that of her daughters, removed her family to the home of one of Reverend Paynter's parishioners, the family home of James Wellington Draffin, who himself was also held prisoner at the fairgrounds. The arrest of these individuals does not seem to have been a complete confinement. The Reverend Paynter's words indicated that they were at least allowed the freedom of the earthworks and possibly the fairground. How much wandering was done as rain began to fall on the evening of the 12th is uncertain. The attack was made around 6 a.m. on the morning of the 13th, at which point they were ordered into one of the tents within the earthworks. Paynter then dictated a narrative that differed from the other accounts relayed by soldiers and correspondents from the 5th Iowa. He spoke of some of the attacking troops pressing up close to the earthworks and of concern that they might be carried by storming. An analysis of the nature of the battle actions will take place at another time. But what is worth noting, the prisoners remained in their Sibley tents, which were large enough to house all of them. The earthworks only rose 4 feet in height and were approximately 10 feet wide. It is not difficult to imagine stray balls tearing the fabric of their shelter as they hunkered down and stayed low to the ground, trying to envision what was going on outside. One of the captains, rather Kaiser or Beale the Reverend did not say, appeared at the opening of their canvas jail with a stream of profanity and curses. He brandished his sword at the prisoners and ordered them to mount the breastworks and become protection for his men. The prisoners were forced towards the breastworks at bayonet point. The Reverend then went on to state that Major Epstein halted the group and suggested that one of the prisoners go out under a flag of truce. According to Reverend Paynter, William E. Burr, cashier of the Bank of St. Louis, produced a white handkerchief which was then attached to the cane belonging to Reverend Paynter. Mr. Burr then raised the flag, bravely mounted the breastworks, and as the firing slackened, advanced to meet Major John Poindexter, whose forces were attacking from the direction of the town. In an exchange, he informed the Randolph County Major that the attack must be halted or the hostages inside the works would be killed. For reasons we will examine in future videos, Major Poindexter likely did not need a great deal of encouragement to call off the attack. Asking for Major Epstein's terms, he sent Mr. Burr back into the entrenchments to ascertain the Home Guard commander's intentions. Epstein then sent Burr back with the following terms. First, the secession forces were to withdraw 2 miles from the vicinity of Boonville and not renew any attack upon Union forces or citizens. Second, Only 7 men would be allowed in town at a time to procure supplies. Third, the arms of the wounded and dead had to remain on the field where they fell. And fourth, the Union forces will agree to an armistice of 7 days and release the hostages, excepting Mr. Paynter, who would be shot if the terms were violated. He added a postscript stating any hostages held by the secessionists must be released. Reverend Paynter denied any attack by Colonel Brown's force upon civilians, and indeed there seems no evidence to disprove him. He also denied that the Missouri State Guard held any hostages, though this doesn't exactly square with Walter Williams' article and the detainment of Boonville citizen and former Home Guard George William Somm. Major Poindexter, for his part, did not linger. The wounded were removed to Thespian Hall on 5th or Main Street and to Delphi College on 4th Street. Poindexter seems to have left the wounded in the care of Boonville citizens and quickly moved west to join Price at Lexington. Correspondence taken from the official records placed him there with several independent companies by the morning of the 18th. Some 5 days later, according to the reports of Colonel Congreve Jackson of the 3rd Division of the Missouri State Guard. The Reverend Paynter's recollections are thorough, but they lack a specific detail of other accounts. No mention is made of the presence of any contraband slaves. There are several possible reasons for this, first among which is the stresses undoubtedly placed on his mind in the tense excitement of the situation. Tunnel vision likely removed any such details from his notice during those pivotal moments. If those individuals were clothed in any manner, as accusations we will soon encounter say, they would all have been easier to miss. There is the possibility that the individuals may also have been present elsewhere at the fairgrounds, perhaps at the arena structure. If they were not combatants, there would have been reason for them not to be within the earthworks. However, enough evidence exists that at least one contraband was present. Paynter either did not personally see him or felt such mention was not warranted. Reading through the remainder of his material gives us no additional insight to this event. In that, he is not alone. Another account, this one of a secondary nature, but believed by its author to be the only connected account then in circulation about the battle, was written on the 2nd of October. The name of this individual is Francis J. Wilkie, a correspondent for the New York Times, who wrote many significant letters about the war in Missouri during 1861. Wilkie's letter detailed the arrival in Jefferson City of Reverend John Eaton Jr., chaplain of the 27th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. En route from Lexington, the regimental chaplain had been detained by Major General Sterling Price, but was released the previous Thursday, the 26th of September. He was given an unconditional release rather than a parole, which allowed him to provide what information he could about Price's force to Colonel Jefferson C. Davis in Jefferson City. His release was to have taken him directly to Jefferson City, but, Wilkie goes on to write, he stopped over in Boonville to inquire about fellow Presbyterian minister Reverend Henry Paynter. While securing the release of Paynter, Reverend Eaton undoubtedly talked to individuals who participated in the battle 2 weeks earlier. Wilkie called Eaton's description the only connected account to the battle. These words are curious, for they suggest that multiple accounts of the battle were in circulation and that they contained either incorrect or exaggerated information. Indeed, several accounts, each differing on specific points, appeared in papers throughout the country that carried the story of Major Epstein and the Home Guard's successful stand. Several papers in publication were printing stories that were detailing the presence of black men who brought intelligence to Major Epstein, and even about some of them having been engaged in combat themselves. Clearly, Wilkie was skeptical of some of the information circulating, and he felt it worth noting in his 2nd October letter what he viewed as a correct account of the actions. From Reverend Eaton, he wrote, Epstein's force of 150 men was attacked by 1,000 men under Colonel Brown. Neither side had artillery, and the Nationals succeeded in getting inside the entrenchments, where they were able to ply their small arms fire to great effect. The action lasted 46 minutes before the Confederates withdrew. They left 24 dead on the ground, with 10 more later dying of their wounds. This information was provided by an individual taken prisoner. I have included Francis Wilkie's account here instead of with other correspondence for two reasons. The first is that these are from personal letters not yet turned into news. The second is that they provide an important bridge in the development of the story. The letters written home by the soldiers of the 5th Iowa and the various correspondents provide details that do more than just merely suggest the involvement of contraband slaves. The involvement of these people in the role of couriers of intelligence is confirmed by Colonel John Kelton's order of 6 October ordering the transfer of 6 slaves to Jefferson City to remove them from the threat of their masters. The second means of contraband involvement was their presence in the earthworks as combatants. One was even said to have fired the shot that killed Colonel William Brown. These accounts begin with correspondence in the days immediately following the battle. What they lack is the level of connectedness that the references of intelligence carriers does. All of these accounts use suggestive language or exaggerated dialogue for added effect, and they lack confirming evidence such as Kelton's order. Consider that the Buchanan County Guardian's published account of the arrival of the contraband in Independence, Iowa. This individual was said to have been one of the 3 who brought valuable intelligence to Major Epstein. In what was a lengthy account, this unnamed individual never discussed taking up arms, nor any of the other contrabands doing so. In another account, which seemed to provide plausible details about the alleged incident, additional facts are added that were not corroborated in any other account. It is indeed plausible that a slave might try to help identify his master who was attacking the post, but no other account detailed Colonel Brown as being mounted on a horse. If this was exaggerated, might also the conversation about the individual taking aim and firing be as well? Certainly the fact that he helped identify his master, which resulted in a mortal wound, might be cause enough to be tickled to death. Wilkie's letter indicates that he is aware of these growing accounts and sheds light on his opinion of the growing story. It is apparent that he considers the stories of slave combatants both exaggerated and false, the subject of a rumor that might have some kernel of truth in regards to intelligence, but was certainly greatly exaggerated in anything exceeding that capacity. His observation is an important bridge for the next letter of examination, that of Boonville citizen Nancy Chapman Jones.